Welcome to the weekly pivot for November 23rd, 2025. All right, it's going to be a short week this week. Markets are closed Thursday for Thanksgiving, and they'll close early on Friday, 1 p.m. for stocks, 2 p.m. for bonds. We do have a bunch of data coming out this week. So Tuesday, we've got retail sales, PPI, consumer confidence. Wednesday, we've got PCE, GDP, Fed Beige Book, and then Friday, we've got Chicago PMI. Let's talk about last week. So we did not recover the quarterly long trigger or the daily 21 for continuation. In fact, we ended up taking the bearish case, which was losing the quarterly pivot and the daily 48 on a daily closing basis, which ended up stopping us out of our SPY 700 calls for January. And in fact, we got that loss of 6,600, 6,550 demand zone for a weekly mean reversion back to the weekly 21. Now, we talked about it last week. You know, we had 10 pullbacks to the daily 21.48. 9 out of those worked. This last 10th one did not. That's a market signal. And we ended up getting weekly mean reversion, which we haven't had actually. We haven't even seen the weekly 21 since May. So here I've got a weekly chart and I've got long-term levels. And let's talk about a few things here that I think are kind of important. So most notable and most important is that we almost got a weekly 21 test. And it's been a very long time since we've been down here. In fact, last time we tested the weekly 21 was back in May. And of course, last year we talked about this a lot. The market was incredibly strong, and we did not get a weekly close below the weekly 21 for any of these tests, including this carry trade blow up from last July. Right, that we ended up going below it and then coming back above it. And in fact, we didn't actually end up failing the weekly 21 until earlier this year when the 2025 bear market happened. So very important spot for the market to kind of test things. The bear market earlier this year, we had a failure of the weekly 21, and then we had a weekly VOMI down to below 5,000. But in other scenarios where we've actually held the weekly 21, held demand there, we've had some nice moves to the upside. So kind of an important spot for the market. And, we've got important supports down here below at 6,400. And of course, 6,600 is an important, pivot that we've talked about. So we've got a daily chart here. I've posted, something kind of similar to this earlier, a couple days ago. And, most important things to note, I'm not going to be bullish until the bulls recover this quarterly pivot. And really the quarterly pivot and the daily 21. Right now, the daily 21 has been bearish resistance. We had 3 rejections of it last week. We got, we talked about it in the last episode that we had this rejection here that was not necessarily a good sign. And we ended up getting a couple more rejections of the daily 21. Of course, this big one last Thursday, which was a considerable sell. So far, this 6,600, 6,550 demand zone is holding up. We've got the 6,600 pivot. We did close above it last week, but that's an important level, 6,600 to basically 6,688.46. That zone is very important. And then, of course, if we lose this 6,550 support, we can go and test this demand zone, between 6,500 and 6,400. And that's between the weekly 21 and the monthly 8 EMAs. That's kind of what I'm looking for into this week. Pretty simple levels that we can monitor. Pretty simple structure for the market right now. We are in a technical downtrend. We've broken, key supports here. So until we start to break some of these lower highs, I wouldn't expect any continuation upside. In the meantime, there is room to go lower. That is definitely a possibility, and certainly this demand zone down here would be where I'd be looking for next to find some support if we break those levels. And of course, again, not really going to look bullish until we get above the quarterly pivot and we get above the daily 21 and maybe build some structure up there as well. That's your weekly pivot for November 23rd, 2025. I'll see you in the next one.